My name is Chris Scott. I'm presenting my final result of my dragon here. So, if we look here, I have my dragon. As far as inspiring the shape and choice and everything, so I would imagine some of this here is based off of the dragon from Shrek, with kind of the color and probably a little bit of Barney in there. Um, as far as things I did a little differently, the horns, I made more of a shape, I would imagine. The tails, just because every time I've ever seen a dragon in a movie, they have their tail as a weapon. I made the claws a bit longer, more like talons, and I made the wings from the start a bit more of like a cupped shape, so they look more realistic to that you'd see on a bird. But now jumping into how it was made and the code. So if we look here, sorry, on the scripting portion, you can see that it calls build dragon. Now in the code, if we come all the way to the very top, build dragon calls all these different functions. And so kind of coming through these here, we'll call create dragon body. How that worked is we created a vertex here and then ran a loop to translate that coordinate. And it basically made a line that made this shape. We applied some skin modifiers to give it kind of that noodle look. And then from there, we adjusted the radii at each vertex so as to control, the contours of the body there. And you'll see that it's pretty much a similar approach for each part of this, where we have the vertexes, a translation of the vertexes to create the shape, and then applying the skin modifiers, and then adjusting the radii, and then running a loop. And so coming down to the dragon legs, you'll see the same thing. Starting coordinates, translate. That's for the front, and then the back. And then we add the skin modifiers, and we add the mirror modifier, so that way we have a right and left leg, front and back. And then coming down here, again, a for loop, running all that. Same thing with the wings. Wings are a little bit different though, because that's where we did the animation. So we have the wing indices. That way we could have the armatures. Essentially, we're setting the coordinates for the armatures referencing the coordinates of the wing structure, not the mesh, but like the bones themselves. And then we come down here, again, translate chords, run a for loop. This is building everything out. And then adjust the radii. And then here, this was locating and creating the bones that we called them in the mesh of the wings, so as to create more sections or folds, so that when it's animated it folds more naturally. So that's what this is here, and as you can see, it's referencing the coordinates within the wing indices. And that's just finishing out creating those folds in the wings. And then if you look at the horns, same general approach as I described earlier. We're going to come through here. We're going to ensure edit mode, create the new object, set a starting coordinate, set translation coordinates, run the loop. Then we'll have the modifiers applied, adjust the radii, run a loop again to make sure all of the modifiers are applied and everything is as we want. Same, like with the horns and the claws, pretty much the exact same thing. And then we come down to the tail spikes. Exact same approach as the horns and the claws, because they're all pretty similar style shapes, style objects. And then we get to the eyes. And so you can see everything is separated out here, so it's a bit easier to customize one part of the dragon and not affect the changes on the other parts of the dragon. It's also effective in debugging things, so if I work on one part and I mess something up, I have not messed up every part of the dragon. I can come in here and look at one specific section of code, makes it a bit easier to debug. Adding the splines, I pretty much just followed along with the videos. Scales and colors, Same thing here, two separate functions. That way you could change maybe what you want the material to look like, and the colors would stay the same, or vice versa. Or just change the color of one part, or the material of one part of the dragon. And then we come down here to the functions that are adding the claws, adding the different parts to the actual body of the dragon. And then we have the animate dragon function, which calls the wing armature and wing animation. So the wing armature is the robotic metal looking things that you see on here. This will load and move, and of course it's crashed. Alright, so here are the wing armatures, these gray parts. And you can see we're referencing the wing indices to set those up, referencing those coordinates. Now, coming down here, setting up the bones that created the armatures, and then setting the object as parents so as to be able to rotate them and use them as like the axis point basically. And then coming down here, this is what actually controlled how they rotate. This part was very confusing to me. I could not figure out for the life of me which of these parameters or variables, like what each of them specifically controlled. There was a lot of trial and error to get it to look how I wanted it to fold. What I was trying to do is get this one moving a bit more forward and this one folding down on top of it, kind of going this dot to this dot with this one coming forward. So I was able to figure that out, but I could not really comprehend what each variable was controlling. It seemed counterintuitive to me. Like negative moved it where you would think positive would, and things like that. But as you can see, the middle part folds forward, and they all come in on top of each other. So I thought that was a more natural look there. So there's my dragon. And then as far as it being modular, everything is separated for the most part. The claws, horns, and tail spike are all pretty similar. They're all within the same function. Let me see here. Alright, so basically the different files we use to prevent having to write redundant code. So we made these methods here so we could quickly flip between the modes. We got the materials to set up the scales and everything there on each of the different objects in the body. Mesh to create an object. We did that once we realized we had to separate everything out and make different objects and kind of place them all together to make the full dragon. And the modifiers, this is where you'll see those modifiers that are referenced throughout the scene file to add on, the skin layers and things like that. But that is pretty much it. That's my dragon there. One more time with the animation.